Amen. Please be seated. So we're continuing in this Eastertide season in which the church is trying to figure out what in the world does it mean for this one that we have followed to come to life, to be raised to new life, and to be living among us. So what does that mean? And so we're listening and been focusing on the words of Jesus as Jesus is telling us who he is and helping us to understand what it means then to live the kind of life that he invites us into. And so 2 weeks ago, we had the first of the great I am statements. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. And so we talked a bit about what it means for him to be a shepherd and for him to guide and watch over his flock. And then last week it was, Jesus said, I am the true vine. And so we looked at what it meant for Jesus to be the vine, this agricultural image that everybody would have been familiar with, and an image from faith that always, through history, through all of the Old Testament scriptures, it described the people of God that oftentimes had gone astray. And so Jesus comes back and he calls his people back and he says, I am the true vine. I'm the true one, the true vine. And you are the branches. And so what it means for us to be plugged into this flow of the life force that comes from this true vine and that fills us with the life and energy to be able to produce fruit that will last. And so we're now in the second part of that passage. So we're still building on Jesus being the true vine. And so we're talking now about fruit. So what is the fruit? Now, St. Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, he talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and there are a number. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control. All of these are fruit of the working of the Spirit in our lives. But the major gift, the major fruit that he gives to us is love, right? Faith, hope, and love, these three abide, but the greatest of these is love, right? And so he spends this entire reading kind of talking about what love means. And it can be very confusing because in our world, there is nothing out there that people talk about more than love. They sing about it, they dance about it, they make movies about it, they write novels about it, all kinds of things. And for the most part, it's muddled mush. Right? I mean, it just is. It's very confusing, this confusing world in which we live. And so Jesus is trying to help us to hone it in. And so he gives us a definition of love. He says, I want you to love one another as I have loved you. Love one another as I have loved you. Oh, well, that now becomes more specific, doesn't it? Because now, all of a sudden, we are recreating the kinds of behaviors that Jesus himself evidenced for us, that he modeled for us as we're in relationship with people who are close to us and far away, people who are our friends and people who are our enemies. And so we look to Jesus and we want to learn his behavior so that we can produce this fruit called love. And one of the things as we look at Jesus, one of the things that's remarkable about him is his willingness to listen to people. His willingness to take the time and to listen to people. So if you just kind of go back in your mind through the Gospels, the numbers of times when Jesus, there are just all of these, these demands, people pulling on his coattails, right, who want his attention, and his willingness to just focus in on an individual in the midst of all of the distractions, to focus in and to really listen to what was going on in the life of that person. And you could give example after example after example of the times in the Gospels when Jesus listened to the people who are around. And that was an example of how it is that Jesus gave love to others. There's the Stephen ministry, is a ministry that we have here at St. Mary's that is a ministry specifically about listening. And so they are going to have a continuing ed session on Monday about listening and how is it that we do listening. But in particular, they're going to use material in a podcast that comes from the author of this book, Peter Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And this book is one of a number of series of books that he's written about what emotionally healthy spirituality is. And he says that it's impossible for us to grow spiritually without growing emotionally. That we have to be emotionally healthy in order for us to be able to give ourselves to others. And so all of the scripture reading that we might do, and all of the praying that we might do, and all of the generosity that we might give, all of those things, really, as St. Paul said, they mean little or nothing if love is not the prevailing focus. And we have to emotionally be healthy in the way that we handle our relationships with each other. And so one of the chapters in that book has to do specifically with love. But it's interesting, he spends the entire chapter on love talking about listening and what it means for us to be devoted and skilled listeners for each other. And he talks about three great questions to be asking ourselves as we're talking to each other, because I don't know about you, but I am a radically bad listener. Sloppy in the ability that I have to be able to attend to and to take in information because I'm so full of things that I think are so important that we want to just kind of get it out there. I didn't say full of anything else. I know the choir was back there just waiting for me to say that. But this ability to listen doesn't just come naturally. It comes because we've developed the tools in order to be able to do that. And part of it is for us to monitor our progress as we actually engage in the act of listening with others. And so Jesus certainly must have done that. As he was growing up, as he was in a family, as he was in his village, he certainly must have thought about, what does it mean to connect with these people? And in order to connect with them, I have to be able to know what's in them. I have to listen to them. And so so Peter Scazzero references actually another author, and he says there are three different questions we can ask ourselves as we're listening to others. One is, are you actually present with the other person, or are you distracted? Are you actually present with the person, or are you distracted? Now, you may think that's easy, but it's not easy, right? So wives, I'm going to ask you whether that's easy for your husband to do or not. I can tell you what Darla would say if she was here. To be able to be present and focus on being present with the person who is there takes focus and skill. I remember I was a newly ordained priest, and I was talking with a woman in the parish hall, and she was telling me something that was important to her, and I had this habit of checking my watch, just kind of looking at my watch. And she saw me looking at my watch, and she said, so do you need to go someplace? Well, in reality, my mind was already there, right? And so I needed to apologize to her and to kind of come back and refocus on what it was that she was saying. Now, sometimes we don't have the time. Sometimes we don't have the capacity in that moment to be able to genuinely focus in and listen. And so what I am tempted to do is to pretend that I'm not distracted and that I do have the time, when oftentimes I just simply don't. And so there is an opportunity for us to say to the other person, what you're trying to say to me, clearly you care about it and it's important to you. And so I have to go and I have to do something else. I have to take care of something else. But could we set up a time so that we can grab a cup of coffee and just sit down and actually go through this conversation so I can listen to you? I can't tell you how many times that would have saved an argument in our marriage, right? If rather than just faking it, if we'd actually set up a time and I could have said, Darla, what you've got to say is so important, and yet I'm thinking about 5 other things. And so if we could tonight, or if we could later set up a time so that I can actually focus on what you're saying, then she would feel cared for and not slighted. Are you genuinely present or distracted? And then the second one, and these get progressively harder for me. The second one, are you accepting, lovingly accepting, or are you judging? Are you lovingly accepting of the person, or are you judging? Well, let me tell you, our culture, as I think I've said before, our culture, has refined judging to a fine hobby, right? We can find all kinds of things to judge others by. We can judge them by their socioeconomic status. We could judge them by the color of their skin. We can judge them by their vocabulary and how loquacious they are. We can judge them by whether they have a nose piercing or not, or whether they're tattooed, or what their body odor smells like. We can judge them by their history and the things that they've done to us in the past. We judge them without even knowing that we're judging them. And that's particularly true for people who are close to us, because we carry family history with us. And so we carry with us oftentimes the history of other things, slights, that somehow then make their way into the current conversation that we're having. And so I'm kind of going through, all of those things in my head as I'm trying to listen to this other person. Well, I'm not listening to them. And oftentimes, I'm looking for the opportunity to be able to tell them what I really think, right? So, Jesus was famous for not judging the people who came to him. He met, apart from all of the other religious leaders who were around him and all of the community standards that were around him, he met with prostitutes. He met with tax collectors. He met with Gentiles. He met with women, and he met with men. He met with people who had scandalous backgrounds. And yet he was focused acceptingly, lovingly on who they were. He focused lovingly on people who betrayed him, who denied him, who refused to give him the time of day. He accepted them and refused to judge them. I don't know about you, but I got a lot of work to do on that, right? And then a third one. So the first one is, am I present or distracted? The second one is, am I lovingly accepting or judging? And then the third one, I think probably is the hardest one for me. Am I open to being changed by this person, or am I closed? Am I open to being changed by this person, or am I closed? Oftentimes it doesn't even occur to us to ask that question. Am I open to being changed by this person? Because we are so confirmed in the things that we believe. We are so absolutely certain that we are right. So does anyone here enjoy being right? Absolutely. We like being right. We've worked hard to get right? We've got a lot invested in our opinions and how it is that we've come to the place that we are. And yet, the more convinced, the more intransigent we are in the opinions that we hold, the more we cut ourselves off from the opportunity of relationship with others. Jesus was consistently available to others, allowing them to impact him and to change the kinds of things that he did. And so, if we are convinced that Jesus is the truth, I am the way, the truth, and the life, if we're convinced that he is the truth, then we can just kind of chill out a little bit, huh? and allow Jesus and his love to be able to direct us as we're in the relationships with the people who are around us, and have confidence that the Spirit of God is working both in this person and me as I open myself vulnerably to the other person who I may vehemently disagree with. And yet, I love, because Jesus commands us to do that. Frank Laubach was a famous missionary who was not very successful for a long time in the Philippines. He'd gone. It was a dream of his. He just, as he completed seminary and he completed his advanced degrees, he was convinced that he had the gifts necessary to be able to go to the Philippines. This is before World War II, to go to the Philippines, and that it would be a beacon of light for the Asian world. And so he went with all kinds of ideas about what it was that he was going to do. He was going to plant churches. He was going to plant schools. He was going to open hospitals. He was going to create a kind of a new enlightenment, a new spiritual Mecca there in the Philippines. And yet he went, and what he found was the people wouldn't give him the time of day. I mean, they would just not even hardly talk to him. And the imams, the local religious leaders, these Muslim people, they gave him the cold shoulder wherever it was that he went. And he worked hard to try to overcome it, and he was not successful. And in the process, malaria hit, and he and his wife were living there. They had 4 kids, and 3 of his daughters died of malaria. And so that their last child wouldn't be afflicted, she had to move away. And so she was going to be for long months, she was going to be gone. And so now he was left all by himself, with failure in terms of his career, afraid of what his superiors and supporters would say, having lost now several of his children because of the situation he put them in, and his wife and the only remaining child gone away. And so he took his dog and he went up onto the mountainside and had a long prayer wrestling session with God. He said, "Why did you call me here?" And there's all kinds of things that are so important that would benefit these people so much, and they won't receive it from me. Why? And he felt like God spoke to him, and God said, "Well, Frank, it's because you don't love these people." Well, that pierced him to the heart. And he said, "Well, I will do anything in order to be able to build a relationship with these Minoan people." And he felt like God saying to him, "Well, then, if you want them to hear what is important to you, then you need to hear and receive from them what is important to them. Go study the Quran." That didn't go over well. He was an educated Christian man. He'd given his life to missions and to evangelism and converting people. He didn't go to learn the Quran. But then he didn't have many options. And so out of humility, he left the mountain and he went back to the local religious leaders and he said, "Could you send to me some local leaders who will teach me the Quran?" And they beat his door down. Everybody coming with a Quran under their arm so they could convert this white infidel. And so then they began to develop a conversation. He began to give himself in learning this holy book of theirs. And in the process, they became curious about why he would come and through such sacrifice spend such time with them. And they were curious then about this Bible of his and this family of his and the English language and education in schools and hospitals, and soon churches were built. Schools were opened and hospitals were founded. Never would have happened if he had not opened his heart to receiving what was important to the people who are around him, their holy book. You know, everybody's got a holy book. It may not be written, but everybody's got a holy book of what is important in their lives, who they are, where they've come from, the things they've experienced, the successes they've had, and also the failures they've gone through. Everyone has a holy book. Not everyone has someone who's willing to read it or hear it. That's the gift of love, the patient endurance to be able to set aside our own agendas, to be able to not care about who's right and wrong, but willing to enter into a loving relationship with another human being because we trust in the Lord of all creation. We trust on the one who gave his life for us and rose from the dead. We trust that this one who is the way, the truth, and the life, that he is the one who will guide the discussion and open our hearts, heal us, and make us one. That is the miracle of Easter. Amen.